Welcome everyone. This is the session about Exchange 2016 and if it's worth upgrading to Exchange 2016 regarding from which Exchange server you're coming from. My name is Peter Schmidt. I'm from EG in Denmark, doing consulting on mainly Microsoft infrastructure. EG is a company that does everything in the IT business, but I'm in our Microsoft infrastructure department as one of the architects. My main focus area is Exchange, Office 365, and some Skype for Business. And these surrounding technologies around that, Azure, more and more Azure, especially around security and Azure AD, ADFS, and so on. I'm a Microsoft MVP. Been an MVP for 8 years by now. Previously known as Exchange MVP. Now Microsoft renamed and rebranded everything for. So now we are Office Servers and Services MVPs. I'm also a certified master on Exchange. I went through the master's program on Exchange 2007 and 2010, and then around 2013. Microsoft closed down the program. So, besides that, I'm heavily active in several Microsoft communities, especially in Denmark, maintaining one of the user groups around Office 365, Exchange, and Skype for Business. There's my contact info and blog. You're welcome to contact me if any question comes up after this session. So, on to today's topic here, Exchange 2016. The agenda I have now is we'll look into what's new in Exchange 2016, look into the architecture, what needs to be done or how you manage the coexistence scenarios you might run into. And in the end, we'll sum up of all the features and how everything is done, and have a brief look into if it's actually worth upgrading. It probably depends on many things. And then in the end, there is some room for Q&A. But if you have any questions along the way, don't feel free to ask the questions along the way. I also got 2 giveaways in regards to questions. So the best questions get a book from some of my fellow Exchange MVPs. The book is Exchange or Office 365 for Exchange Professionals, if some of you might already know it. The book is written by Tony Redmond, Paul Cunningham, who runs ExchangeServerPros.com, and Michael van Hornbeck, also known as Fan Hybrid. Let's get on to the topic here. Exchange Server 2016. Just a question in the audience. Is anyone already running Exchange Server 2016 though? A few hands. 2013, anyone on that? That's more like it. And 2010? Anyone on 2007 still? A few. 2003 maybe. Good. Anyone doing hybrid or already moved to Office 365? A few. Good. Okay, if we start to look into Exchange Server 2016, it's a product from Microsoft that has been on the way for the past 2 or 3 years. The server product was released back in October when it went in RTM. The product has actually been running in Office 365 in production for everyone using Exchange Online for over a year and a half by now. So what happens with these future Exchange Server product is that Microsoft actually put the servers into production in Office 365 as soon as they feel it's mature and they do the testing and everything. So basically the products we are now getting for the on-prem is a product that's, as Microsoft also states it, forged in the cloud. One of the benefits by this is also that we are actually getting a product that it's been heavily tested. We're pretty sure that it's a reliable and stable product when we get it. And that's where we are now with Exchange Server 2016. So if we look into what Microsoft put into this new product here, they focused on some certain areas in enhancement. One of them is better collaboration. In the collaboration area, they focused on something some of you might have heard of as modern attachments. And in the inbox, they've tried to enhance the inbox experience for our end users to make it easier to find the emails we need in all the emails that we process and get every day. They've done a lot of enhancements on the mobility platform, especially around apps, which you might already know. On the data center wise, they've done a few changes on the architecture, but otherwise a lot of it still looks like it did in Exchange 2013. They matured some of the bits, and there's been a few changes to some parts. I'll dig deeper into that when we get there. There's been some changes in security, and especially around compliance, where they've done a lot of enhancements and also extended some of it into the cloud, where you can get even more features on the compliance part. If we start to look into the collaboration bits, primarily what Microsoft wants to do here is kind of remove the scenarios where we attach emails or attach documents to our emails for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is to keep the size of the emails down, but also to make it a better collaboration platform. One way of doing that is kind of removing the attachments. So whenever you attach something in the new platform running, for instance, Outlook 2013 and Exchange 2016 as well, you're kind of uploading your documents to something else. It could be SharePoint, OneDrive. The platform to get there will be, if we are talking about a pure on-prem environment, you'll need SharePoint server on-premise, and you'll need an Office online server on-premise. The Office online server was previously known as Office Web App Server, a server which we used both for rendering in over on Exchange 2013 or with Lync or Skype for Business. Now it's heavily used with Exchange 2016 as well, especially if you want to do all these modern collaboration features. Both SharePoint and the Office Online server has not yet been released, but from what I've heard, we should expect them here in maybe Q1 or Q2. So if we're not ready to do this on-prem, we can do a hybrid version of this. So basically that would be that we, instead of putting our documents on-prem, we are putting them in Office 365. It could be in OneDrive for Business or SharePoint in Office 365. We'll still need the Office Online server on-prem because that handles a lot of rendering, especially in our Outlook web app experience for the users. The way some of this could look for the end user would be that if they look in, as in this example, which is taken from the Outlook web app version, where a user is seeing an attachment. It looks, this is a scenario where a user has a normal attachment, and the way they can benefit from the Office Online server in that scenario is that instead of downloading the document when it's attached, we can actually view it directly within over. And it's the Office Online server that is doing all the rendering. Next step would be that we can actually edit the document without actually downloading it. So all that will happen online in a browser for the user. Next focus for Microsoft has been to enhance the inbox experience for the users, with focus especially on search. So what Microsoft has done is they kind of re-architected the search engine and platform of the Exchange server. So for the end user, that means instead of them being reliant on the Outlook search mechanism, a better search index is built on the Exchange server. So whenever a user is doing any search in Outlook, it actually talks to the backend on the Exchange server, giving them better and faster responses to the search. And also, in the end, more accurate and consistent results, because the result they get back is the same no matter what Outlook version they actually doing the searches or working on, if it's the web version or the full client version. The search also extends towards looking up people. So it's enhanced further. So the whole people experience when you search for a certain email from a certain person, it's way better at finding the exact emails that came from that person. Other enhancements Microsoft has done is that whenever a user attached an URL in an email, that URL is being generated as a preview. So the recipient of this email can actually see a small preview of the website that there was a link for. The sender of the email can decide themselves if they actually want to use this preview or not. And it's the same experience if you're running Outlook 2016 or if you're using the web version to get this. It's more or less the same experience if they want a link to a video or attaching a video. Then the user is getting an embedded video player right in the inbox, right in the email. That's a general enhancement towards all platform and all inboxes, no matter if you're running the web or the full Outlook client. Then Microsoft have put a lot of effort into enhancing the web version of Outlook. Of course, it's also the version that is used often in Office 365. So of course, there's probably a lot of development in that. So we see a lot of new features in that area. I'll not cover all the features, but I'll just name a few of them, which I think is pretty good. For instance, PIN. You can now, if you're working with Outlook Web, and you see number of emails, and some of them is very important to you. So instead of the emails drowning in your inbox, or you kind of miss them or miss getting back to them, of course you can always flag the emails. But if you want the most important emails to be listed, you can use PIN. And PIN will always put the email at top in your inbox. So no matter how many emails you get afterwards, that email will always be on top in your inbox. That's just one of the new features. Another feature is Sweep. And Sweep is a button in Outlook where you get number of features. The main purpose of Sweep is to clean your inbox. So instead of people who might have 100 or 1,000 of mails directly in the inbox folder, Sweep can help you actually sort those mails off the inbox or archive them to another folder in a fast way. With Sweep, you can decide that you just want to archive your whole inbox to an archive folder, and you can name that folder whatever you want if you like that as well. You can also, if you, for instance, receive a lot of newsletters, use Sweep to say, well, I received an email from this company like every day for the last half year, and actually I haven't cleaned out the inbox. I want to do it now. With Sweep, you can tell it that you want to remove all the emails that came from that person or that company to an archive folder, except the latest. So it keeps the latest email in your inbox. Everything else you received of newsletters or whatever from that company is moved to the sweep folder or the archive folder that you have set up. Just to mention a few of the features in the web version. When we're talking about web and we're talking about the new Exchange version, in this session I'll cover the on-prem version of Exchange 2016. But since we compared a lot to the Exchange Online version, there is some features that only exist in Exchange Online. And one of those features is named clutter. And clutter is kind of the mess you have in Outlook when you really receive a lot of emails. And with this new clutter feature, Microsoft is actually automatically processing emails as they come into your inbox. And they end up in the clutter folder. So if you're running Exchange Online, you already have a clutter folder. Depending on the language you run, it might be called something else, but the feature is still there. The main benefits of clutter is it tries to focus your inbox on the most important mails you get. So if you get a lot of emails or from vendors or newsletters or something else that you only read occasionally, those will end up in the clutter folder. And people or emails from people you communicate with externally or internally, they'll end up in the inbox, the most important place in your Outlook web. Of course, there can be false positives, but clutter learns on the way. So it definitely gets better and better at detecting the right email so they go to the right place. So if you need mails or cannot find a mail, it might have ended up in the clutter. But clutter is a feature that Microsoft already announced will not come into the on-prem version of Exchange. So there we already start to see a difference between the online version of Exchange and the on-prem version. And it will probably not be the last feature being strictly online and not going into the on-prem version. But so far it's more or less one of the only features, but we'll see. They are also focused around mobility, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of that is connected to the Microsoft strategies around mobile first and cloud first and all that. So Microsoft initiative here is definitely from the Exchange team. They put a lot of effort into creating apps for different platforms. So now you've got a great Outlook app for your iOS, Android, and iPad platform as well. And what they really want to make is dependent on if you're using the web version, either on an iPhone, iPad, or in a browser, or compared to the full Outlook version. They want to make the user experience as consistent and as seamless as possible. And that's where they're putting the effort into here. Other enhancements when we're talking about the more infrastructure parts is on hybrid. With Exchange 2016 here, we have the new hybrid configuration wizard. And with hybrid on Exchange 2016, we can connect our on-prem environment to Exchange Online in Office 365. When we do that, we kind of create a tunnel between Office 365 and our on-prem, which makes sure that every mail that goes to that is secure mail, encrypted. And it also gives us and the end users a unified global address list. So all mail-enabled object from your on-prem will also be available to users in Exchange Online when you start to do hybrid. Of course, moving those mail-enabled objects to Office 365 also requires some directory synchronization based on AD Connect, which I'll not cover here. And with hybrid, we're also getting, or the users are getting, the free Busy and the calendar sharing experience they already have on-prem. And they're getting that seamlessly, independent if they're communicating with users in your core that's online or some that's on-prem. But I'll not go deeper into hybrid since I have a whole session only about hybrid tomorrow. So we'll spend a lot more time on the hybrid topic tomorrow if you're interested in that. When we talk about hybrid or connecting the on-prem exchange to more features in the cloud, there can be multiple reasons for keeping the exchange on-prem, but still benefiting from some of the new functionalities and services we see coming in Office 365. You can leverage from services that has, for instance, the newer services like advanced threat protection, or some of the newer e-discovery services, even though you're still hosting and doing all your exchange on-prem, for instance, with Exchange Server 2016 here. So to sum up around what's new in Exchange Server 2016, some of the areas that also has been changed is the architecture around roles. So the client access server has now, the role we know from Exchange 2013 or 2010 has now been moved into the mailbox role. So with 2016 here, we now have one role and only one role when we try to install Exchange. With Exchange 2016, we have support for modern authentication. It's based on the ADAL protocols. ADAL is Active Directory Authentication Library from Microsoft. It's a new way of authenticating against services. And we're seeing it more and more with the cloud services, especially with users connected in different ways, and not only just being on-prem and domain joined all the time. Using modern authentication can give the users a more seamless and a better sort of single sign-on experience to the services, no matter if it's on-prem or in Office 365. And there's support for that with the new Exchange Server. There are some requirements on the client side for that as well. You need at least Outlook 2013 Service Pack 1 and up for that to work properly. There's a new protocol in the way Outlook connects to Exchange. It's MABI over HTTP, which is the default protocol in Exchange Server 2016 now. And as I referred to a number of times, the Outlook Web, Microsoft rebranded all that, so it's now Outlook on the web instead. And some of the areas which I already mentioned with the integration to the whole modern attachment stuff. Hybrid is covered, but just a brief note around hybrid. When we're doing hybrid with Exchange Server 2016, we are using an app which is now fully cloud-based. And that means that whenever you run the hybrid configuration wizard, it's more or less the same scenario with the Exchange Server 2013 as it is now with 2016 here. Whenever you run it, a new version is automatically downloaded from the web. So you're always running the latest version that Microsoft releases. And actually they more or less release new versions in here every day, because whenever there's a bug or a small failure, Microsoft keeps monitoring the whole hybrid configuration setup environment, and whenever they see small failures, they tend to fix it right away and put it into the new hybrid configuration wizard. So that's definitely a more lean and faster way of making sure that hybrid always is updated. That's put a lot of effort into areas around data loss prevention, DLP. So there's new features around DLP and the transport around DLP as well. So what's gone from Exchange 2016 here? Because even though Microsoft put a lot of new features into 2016, they also removed some of the stuff. First one, as I already mentioned, was the CAS role, client access server. It's been removed because that actually kind of been put into the mailbox role now. They removed the MAPI connectivity. The MAPI connectivity you could do with older client against Exchange has been removed, so that's not possible anymore with Exchange 2016 here. Also CDO connectivity against Exchange server. If you are doing any custom application or have any old code running against your Exchange, you have to update that code because it will not work anymore with Exchange Server 2016. You have to use the new services for something like that, like the Exchange Web Services or the REST IPs. Support for older Outlook versions has also been removed. And some other features which has, there's kind of still in there, but as Microsoft is referring to them as DM-phased, which means that they will probably not be in the next version of Exchange. And so far it's features which has gotten taken over by other services, or it's stuff that Microsoft knows is not being used anymore. If we look at the Exchange environment, Exchange 2016 can coexist with 2010, Service Pack 3, and Rollup 10, or later. On the 2013 side, you have to have cumulative update 10 or later to do any coexistence here. On the AD side, we require the AD to be running at least Windows Server 2008 in the domain controller, and we need to have global catalogs in the sites where we deploy Exchange Server. And there are a number of clients which is supported when we want to connect against 2016. We can install Exchange 2016 on 2012 R2, and the upcoming 2016 server as well. We can only install Exchange Server on a full GUI Windows server. So Exchange cannot be installed on a core version of your on a Windows server. That's still not supported. And then for reference, there are some requirements in regards to what Windows features that needs to be installed. And one of the components that needs to be downloaded besides that is the Unified Communication Management API. And that needs to be used for the unified messaging bits of Exchange. So, when you need to get started on this, you need to make sure that all your Exchange servers are on the correct level before you start the deployment. If you're using Exchange Edge transport servers, you need to be aware that you probably need to recreate the Edge subscription doing the install of 2016 here. If you're already on 2010 and are planning to do 2016, you need to do some schema upgrade, like we used to when deploying Exchange. If for some reason you're in doubt if you might need an Exchange Server 2013, for instance, but more or less ready to do the full upgrade to 2016 here. If you want to make sure that you can always introduce a 2013 server into your environment, all you need to do is run the Schema Prep from your Exchange 2013 server before you do it for the 2016 server. That way you can always introduce a 2013 server. If you forget to do the Schema Prep of 2013, you cannot introduce a 2013 server into your Exchange environment if you get those needs. Just something to be aware of. When we deploy Exchange Server 2016 into an environment running 2010, for instance, it creates a new address book. So that also happened with 2013, actually. So we need to be aware of that when the first server is introduced into the environment. And you can see that within the PowerShell because it tends to override and put in the default. So if you want to make sure that you keep running the one you already have and only introduce it to the new mailboxes, you can control that via PowerShell as listed up here. Just something to be aware of during the install. When we start the install of Exchange and have prepped the environment for this, we don't have many options anymore. We can choose to deploy an edge transport, or we can choose to deploy a mailbox role along with the management role, and that's it. All our components that we previously knew from 2010, like the cache, transport, mailbox, all that is within the mailbox role nowadays with 2016. And you can do it with PowerShell as well. So if we look into the architecture behind this, as I mentioned, Microsoft has now made so that we only have one role. And that means that the focus with Exchange is now that we have a simpler architecture. And the main focus with that is that instead of kind of scaling up, it's meant that we sort of scale out. So in this example, we have 5 mailbox servers running in a DAG. And all of these servers are running what we previously know as the cache and transport and unified messaging role within the same box. And that was also some of the latest requirements back with 2010 and also 2013. But Microsoft now went ahead and make sure that that's more or less the only way we could implement it with multi-roles on one box. And then we put a network load balancer in front of this, and that's the way the users or external system communicates with our Exchange environment. Another area where Microsoft have done enhancements or continued with the enhancements is the area of managed availability, which is a service that was introduced with Exchange Server 2013, and they continued the improvement on that. And what that service actually does, it keeps monitoring your Exchange environment. Those of you already running 2013 or 2016 might have experienced that the server can generate a lot of log files and need a lot of space on the drive running Exchange. And that's because the managed availability service is constantly monitoring your environment. It will eventually clean up, but to begin with, it will generate a lot of log files. And the recommendation is usually on the drive that you're running Exchange that you have at least around 100 to 120 gig of space, because it generates really many log files. But the benefit of this is it's way better at doing automatic repair. If you have problems in a DAG with failover and stuff like that, it can automatically do all that without intervention from the administrator. Of course, Microsoft has done a lot of work into this because it's also services that they benefit a lot from in Office 365. Now we just get them for the on-prem as well. There has been some changes in the support for the file system. Exchange is now supporting the new file system, REFS, and that's actually the recommended way that the Exchange team is now recommending that Exchange servers are being deployed, because it's optimized to use the way the REFS is formatting and optimizing the drive. We've gotten faster recovery times when we're doing sort of failover, switchover on the DAGs. That's also something that has been updated. With the DAG, further enhancements has been done in regards to it's more loosely coupled to the cluster network. So in the old days, we needed a cluster network name for Exchange and so on, or the DAG to work. We don't need a name for that anymore. The Exchange server just needs its own name, one IP, and then the DAG can run itself. then Exchange manages the DAG itself within Exchange. When we're doing DAGs database availability groups in Exchange, with Exchange Server 2016, we can actually put the file witness server that we need for DAG. We can put that into Azure. And that's supported to do now with the latest version of Exchange. So with the use of Azure, you can actually have your third data center in Azure and have your file share witness up there for Exchange. Besides that, they've done a lot of enhancements on the way logs are shipped between your copies of databases and the search indexes across those DAGs as well. And that's done to enhance the bandwidth optimizations or requirements between the DAGs. And actually, the Exchange team also recommends, whenever you do an Exchange server, use BitLocker to make sure that your environment is encrypted and safe. They also put effort into the IOPS. Whenever a new Exchange server has come out last 10 years, Microsoft have more or less increased or decreased the requirements for IOPS on Exchange. And they actually done it again. I think that now we are around 22% lower requirements to the IOPS side than we had on Exchange 2013 actually. If we take a look at the client side, with all the new changes on the protocol, with MAPI HTTP and connecting to one role on Exchange and all that, when a user connects to Exchange, it connects to the cache components within the mailbox. And it always refers the users to the mailbox role where the user mailbox resides. So if a user is working with OVA or anything like that, the rendering in OVA is happening on the server where the user's mailbox is located. And that's the way the user will be redirected within the Exchange environment. If we take a look at the client protocols, depending on the clients connecting from the outside, all of them are using HTTP and actually hitting the IIS server within Exchange. And if you're using sort of other mail service, IMAP, or if it's SMTP or whatever that comes in, it communicates through the POP3 IMAP, SMTP, or if it's the server that's coming into Exchange. That's the flow that happens. In regards to the client, as mentioned earlier, the preferred protocol in Exchange when client connects to Exchange 2016 is now MAPI HTTP. That was also introduced with Exchange 2013 and is now the preferred way and will be enabled by default. So there are different scenarios when and when not it will be enabled. So if you're running if it's a new environment, of course it will be enabled by default. If you're running 2010 to begin with, it will also be enabled by default. If you're running 2013 already, but actually you disabled this protocol, then it will not be enabled. So if we look at a scenario around MAPI HTTP, where we have an Exchange 2013 organization with MAPI HTTP disabled already, and we want to migrate this to Exchange 2016 here. Our goal would be to enable the MAPI HTTP for users as they are being migrated to 2016. We have to go in and leave the organizational level of MAPI HTTP as false, so we not force it on all users. And prior to kind of moving the mailboxes, we can then use the set cache mailbox commandlets in PowerShell to make sure that it will be enabled on the mailboxes we get ready to move to 2016, and then we can move those to 2016. So when all mailboxes then have been moved to 2016, we can go in and change the MAPI HTTP enable setting for the whole organization and put that in so it's enabled for everyone. And that can be a way where we can, in small steps, kind of leverage where we go from one authentication or one protocol of communicating with Exchange to another, and also moving users to the new platform. If we kind of look at the MAPI HTTP, it's MAPI encapsulated in an HTTPS stream. It's a lot like the Outlook Anywhere connection that we already know within Exchange. It's the way we communicate with Exchange no matter where the user is located. If they are inside the domain and domain join, they'll communicate like this. If they're outside, they'll communicate like this as well. The benefit of all this is that everything is kind of wrapped in one way. And the benefit is that it's way lighter for the users. It helps in scenarios where the connection from the users to the Exchange environment might have been broken, and the users want sort of to reconnect. It could be from going from a wired to a wireless connection, and the reconnection might not have been that good on the old Exchange and Outlook. With this protocol, it connects way better than it did in the past. So if we look into coexistence and migration scenarios, when we want to move to 2016 here. If we take the scenario where we are on Exchange 2010 and want to introduce Exchange 2016, it's more or less the same experience that was introduced when Exchange 2013 came out. We don't need any legacy names configured in the old Exchange environment in Exchange 2010, like we did in the past when we had Exchange 2007. Exchange 2016 can proxy any connection it gets back to 2010, but 2010 cannot proxy any connections to the environment on 2016. So to sum up the steps, to get ready for this, you need to make sure that all your servers are on the correct versions, as referred to in the requirements. The schema needs to be updated. You will then be ready to install your servers. You need to configure the URLs within Exchange 2016 as on 2010, so they're ready to sort of take over. Make sure you have certificates ready on the new servers. And then you can basically swing the load balancer over to your new 2016 servers, and they will take over and make sure they proxy connections to whatever mailboxes is left on 2010. And then you can start setting up the database availability groups on 2016. And in the end, you can move your mailboxes. What's important about this process is if you have multiple sites, you need to start with the sites that are internet facing. So for some organizations, some might have multiple internet facing sites, then you have to take those first and then take the intranet sites first or afterwards. And in the end, you're ready to remove the mail flow, or you can do it whenever you're like 50% done or something. If we take a look at how it will look in a scenario like this, we have 2016 in the middle, so all connections go into the 2016 environment, and the HTTP proxy of 2016 will automatically proxy any connections to the 2010 CAS or 2010 CAS in other sites, if a mailbox is still on 2010. I'll not go through this one. It's meant purely for reference, because the slide decks will be available afterwards. But it's just briefly to sum up in what scenarios, depending on client, how they proxy and connect to 2016 and 2010 and so on. If we have the scenario with 2013 and 2016, still, we don't need any legacy names configured in the environment. 2016 can also proxy to 2013 here. But actually, 2013 can also proxy connection to 2016. So if we keep 2013 in front of our environment, and we have mailboxes moved to 2016, 2013 will proxy those to the mailboxes that we have moved to the new environment. If we sum up those steps in regards to, we need to prep the environment the same way as before, install Exchange. On 2016, we still need to configure the URLs, make sure the certificates are in place, and then we can set up the DAGs in Exchange. We can start moving mailboxes, because at this point, 2013 is still taking care of all the proxying. So when we move the mailboxes, 2013 will proxy those connections to the moved mailboxes on 2016. And it's still important that we take internet-facing sites first, and then take the intranet-facing sites afterwards. And then we can move the mail flow. This is what's called up-version proxy. So everything from the cache side is moved from 2013 to 2016. There was a question.
Is it possible to have 2013 and 2016 on the same DAG?
The question goes if it's possible to have Exchange 2013 and Exchange 2016 in the same DAG. And that is not possible. It's possible they can coexist on the client access level, like in front of a load balancer. But when we're talking about the DAG, you have to create a new DAG on Exchange 2016. A question goes to referring to the load balancer and if it's part of the Exchange. No, load balancing is not part of the Exchange. And it's also not recommended to use the Windows Network Load Balancer, because there are still inconsistencies if you run the DAG and the Network Load Balancer on the same box. And since we are now running multi-role Exchange, we have everything on the same box. So basically, what you have to do is using a load balancer of some third party in front of your Exchange environment, or you can do some sort of DNS round robin, which is also supported with Exchange 2016. There are some books for you two guys with the questions afterwards. Another scenario where we do the downversion proxy is we still need to prep the environment, and then we are ready to install Exchange, configure the URLs, install the certificates, and at that point we sort of swing the load balancer to point at the new Exchange 2016 servers, because then the client access HTTP components of 2016 will handle all the connections with the clients. And then afterwards we can set up the DAG. At this point we still have mailboxes on 2013, but we'll just proxy those down to 2013. And then we can start moving mailboxes and repeat internet, extranet facing sites. We have a question here.
I'm in the middle of actually two migrations into 2016. In both migrations, I see a problem with the phone-based authentication, both for ORA and ECP. So I need to turn off the phone-based authentication to be able to log on to ORA or ECP. And I see in the research on the internet, it's a lot more problem with that. Is that anything you know about?
The question goes in regards to when we do this migration, if we need to do anything around authentication, since it's form-based as default on 2016, as we know on the other Exchange. If we need to do anything in the coexistence, that's what you're asking, right?
I'm struggling with that.
Because that gives you problems. Okay.
It won't let me log on. It just brings back the login.
Yeah, it depends in what scenario you're taking this, because if you're putting the Exchange 2016 server in front, then it will handle the form-based authentication. And then eventually you probably have to change it on 2013 to make sure it can proxy correct down level. And if you're doing the other way around with 2013 in place and it's hitting your 2016, and that's what you might be giving you a headache around authentication, that you have to disable it one place or the other. I hope that answered that question. So. Also around 2013, 2016 client connectivity, also just meant for reference. If we look at the scenario where we have those servers in place, we have 2016 and 2013 and maybe even 2010 servers in place. How does 2016 then do all our proxy? It's the IIS and HTTP proxy components of 2016 that handle all the incoming traffic. And when we have a look at it will start communicating with the Exchange 2010. It's the protocol head or the protocol head which is on the back end of 2013. So what actually happens in a scenario like this is that we could remove a client access server or dedicated client access servers on 2013 when we start to introduce 2016 servers, because 2016 will take over all those capabilities and will proxy directly back to the mailbox servers on that might still be running 2013. 2010, it's a different issue because it still need to proxy to the front end, to the cache level of 2010. But that's the way it does all the coexistence and proxying between the different versions of Exchange. So to sum up on what I've been through in this session, as you can see, Microsoft had done a lot of enhancements on the architecture side, both within the DAG, within search architecture, also around modern attachments. But if you really want to go with the modern attachment, you still need a lot of extra infrastructure. If you want to do it all on-prem, you need the SharePoint and Office Online servers in 2016 versions as well. Otherwise, you will need to do some hybrid stuff if that's the way you want to go. We have the Outlook on the web, which is one of the areas one of the client areas that Microsoft had done a lot of changes to. And we have the area around compliance. Microsoft had done a lot into the e-compliance center and the DLP area. So depending on what Exchange server version you're on now, the question probably goes to if is it worth upgrading to 2016? And I guess that was what I was trying to sum up in this session. It really depends on the version you're coming from, and because 2016 is more or less a service pack for 2013. It doesn't contain that many new features in the server side, besides that a few roles has been changed and the DAC and the search architecture. But it is a major service pack upgrade. That's the way you have to consider it. But it will still be a major service pack upgrade where you cannot do an in-place upgrade. So as we always have to do with new Exchange servers, we have to build up the new Exchange environment next to the one we're already running. So it will always depend on the environment you're coming from. 2010, you'll probably gain a lot going to 2016. From 2013, you might not gain that much, but it could also be a way of maintaining your platforms if you still want to keep your Exchange environment on-prem. So, as you can see from what I went through today, it might be hard to do the final decision on if it fits you right away. If you have any questions in regards to all this, or if it fits more or less into your environment, you are more than welcome to come and find me afterwards. Otherwise, there's room now for more questions. And I'm sorry I don't have any more books. They were sponsored by the guys behind the Exchange Server Pro, and I got 2 books for you 2 guys up there. But if you have any more questions, now is the time. Otherwise, I'm.
Are there any problems related to changing the computer name of the Exchange server after installation?
The question goes to if there are any problems in changing the computer name of the Exchange server after it's installed. Yes, that would be a major problem. That's not recommended. Another question up there?
What about the management tools? Is the ECP still available?
Yeah, management-wise, if the ECP is still available, yes. I didn't cover that, and the reason I didn't cover it was because ECP and the way all the management parts look on Exchange 2016 is exactly as they are on 2013. And that's also why a lot of people is just referring 2016 to a service pack of 2013. There was a question up there? Okay. No. We have a question here.
What's the attitude towards virtualization? Is Microsoft accepting that you run Exchange on a virtualized?
The question goes, what's the attitude towards virtualization of Exchange? Microsoft is supporting Exchange in virtualized environments, and they have supported guidelines if you look on the web which virtualized platform is the supported ones to use. The Exchange team themselves has a recommended way of deploying Exchange, and they say the best way you can deploy Exchange is doing it on physical boxes and with direct attached storage and have Exchange handle everything. But that's not the real world scenario we see out there. I know as a consultant I see a lot of organizations who definitely want to capitalize on the investments in the virtualized environments and also within SANs, even though the Exchange team definitely points the other way around IOPS and direct attached storage. And all that is supported, so you can still do that, yes. There are still, though, regarding virtualizations, you have to check the virtualization guidelines and white papers because the sizing and all that is also different. Yeah. There was a question up here.
Will there be a decent best practice analyzer on-prem installations?
The question goes to if there will be a decent best practice analyzer in Exchange 2016. The short answer is no, because Microsoft discontinued that product. So it's not available for 2013 or 2016, and as far as I know from Microsoft, it will not be available. But a lot of people from the community, especially MVPs, has put a lot of effort into creating scripts that does more or less the same, and that's available on some of the community sites or resources. I think it's GitHub, or you can probably find also references on TechNet Gallery. A question here?
Do you know if there's any changes or plans for the mobile clients, given that the ActiveSync client is not really good and the Outlook client, where you have to send your credentials away from on-premise, accepted users? You know, they had this OVR for iPad for some time, which they discontinued. Is there any changes?
As I understand the question correct, if there are any changes toward how the mobile and especially around ActiveSync,
ActiveSync is more or less obsolete. So for the Outlook for mobile Android or iOS, where you have to send your credentials out of the on-premise. Do you know if there's any changes on the new clients or new methods for?
you're thinking of the Outlook app version where you kind of sync your credentials into the cloud, if there are any changes in regards to how that's done. Yeah. As far as I know, around the architecture of how it's done, there are no new changes. There might come, I haven't heard any. But what's new around it is that instead of like a lot of the debate that was in the press when it came out that Microsoft bought it, it was that suddenly you put your credential in the Amazon cloud. That's what the third-party company did at that point. So of course Microsoft continued with that, but now they, as far as I know, they have moved it to their own data centers. So you're still doing it, but now it's in the Microsoft data centers. If they want to change it the way replication synchronization goes, I haven't heard anything around that now. Yeah. A question here?
What if I'm already running Exchange 2013 and hybrid mode?
The question goes if you're running Exchange 2013 hybrid and you want to go to 2016. Yeah. You can introduce a 2016 server, and like the same way you want to introduce a new 2016 server, install it, have it take over all the URLs and all that, and then you have to run the configuration wizard on that one again. So basically you then upgrade your Exchange environment and having that taking care of the hybrid. So that should be possible here. You should be, might be when you do the switchover, but you can probably do that within the network load balancing or firewall, so it will probably be minimal. There was a question up here.
Can you use Azure Traffic Manager for load balancing?
The question goes if we can use Azure Traffic Manager to load balance Exchange. That's a good question. I really don't know about that. As far as I've seen, it's probably not in the supported docs, but we might be able to use it. I think we probably have to wrap up. If you have any more questions, you're welcome to come down here. Otherwise, I'll say thanks.